few months ago, I was out with some friends at the local Buffalo Wild Wings watching UFC, and I remember seeing Ilia Topuria knock out Charles Oliveira to become a two-division champion. Now, if you guys have followed UFC or anything like that, you know that a few weeks or a few months after that, his wife at the time, had essentially divorced him, or is in the process of divorcing him, and he had to drop the title, essentially drop everything that he worked for, what his entire childhood of grappling and martial arts led to. He had to put on pause, and who knows when or if he's even going to return. He's mentally all over the place, financial damages, again, emotional damages. And I get to thinking why so many men nowadays not only refuse to approach women, but really have no interest at all in approaching women in public settings, whether it's at the malls or wherever it might be. Now, when I hear women talking about this kind of stuff, they'll say that guys are creeps and stuff like that if they don't find them attractive. But the issue now is the metric of what is seen as attractive by, I'll just put it this way, most women, especially those under the age of 30, is a standard set on social media, set on essentially things that are not realistic and not within their own league of dating. So most men are automatically out of that conversation when it comes to approaching women. And of course, there are things guys can talk about game, this kind of stuff. But what people have to understand is most men who just have no interest in approaching women, it's not just because they're afraid to talk to women or they're afraid of rejection or they're not confident. It's because they value peace and quiet, and they value their own peace of mind and being alone over abuse, over drama, over nonsense. The reason why I brought up that Ilia Topuria situation is because I know so many men, which I keep a small circle. Sure, I know a fair amount of acquaintances, but I could count more than with both hands the amount of men I know who have gone through similar situations of abuse, of financial ruin, of divorce, of child support payments, which, by the way, paying child support on a kid that they're not even allowed to see. I have a friend of mine who he had gotten in a divorce, and the wife was supposed to split custody, and she just straight up refused to let the father spend time with the kids. Literally would refuse to let the father pick up the kids, close the door on him. And my friend was trying all he could to see his kids, calling the police about it, and essentially what the police said, oh, well, you got to go to court. This is a civil matter, it's not a criminal matter, meaning he'd have to be out of pocket possibly tens of thousands of dollars to fight for this and see his kids. Keep in mind, she was breaking the law at the time. So not only that, but the system is very heavily stacked against the favor of the decent man, the good man. The man is getting the short end of the stick in this kind of situation. So, and again, that's one of at least 10 different examples that I personally know of from people who I'm friends with or acquaintances with. The fact that this is such a common occurrence, when men hear this kind of stuff, they're not at all going to want to play this game. They're not at all going to want to participate in this kind of nonsense. They're going to value peace and quiet and focusing on their own mission and purpose. Now, I also understand a lot of us, when we're younger, we are more naive to this kind of stuff. We don't have the discernment through experience. A lot of men have made that mistake of getting with women who they've met at bars, nightclubs, dating apps, which by now I'm sure with common sense they know those aren't the kind of places that you would want to find a girl anyway. Even when people talk about the gyms and stuff like that. Not to turn this into a kind of side rant about gym culture, but what gyms have become is not at all what they used to be. I mean, I go to some of these kind of commercial gyms, bodybuilding-oriented gyms, and it's literally a nightclub. It's literally like a nightclub. I mean, again, that's part of why I don't really go to gyms a whole lot anymore when I work out. I've been doing a lot more calisthenics, body weight stuff, because I just don't want to be around that kind of degeneracy. And I understand keeping your head down and working out, but my thing is, if I can choose to not be around that, I'd rather just not do it. If I can work out at home, or if I can work out in a more private setting and not have to be surrounded by that kind of stuff, I don't want to take part in it. But people got to really just understand that when men are not approaching women, it's not because they're afraid to talk to them. It's not because they are intimidated and all this kind of stuff. That might be in some cases. But the reason why there's so many single men under the age of 30 or even over the age of 30 is because they just value their own sanctity. And they're not willing to put women above that. So ultimately, if we're going to be serious and honest in this conversation, women have become very entitled and very brainwashed by a lot of this kind of indoctrination that they've seen, probably if they're Gen Z or millennial, for pretty much their whole lives. And I'm not denying that there's obviously some women that don't fit in that category. There's ones that are that weren't brought up with that kind of indoctrination and stuff like that. I don't know if that means they're from other countries or sheltered, whatever that might mean. But it's becoming harder and harder and harder to find those kind of people. And when I've talked about friendships as well, I'm big on finding your people. You know what I mean? Finding people who are like-minded, which again, those people exist. But again, they're not going to exist in the nightclubs, in the bars, on the dating apps. People talk about things like hobbies, things like church, things like that kind of stuff, where even if you don't see them right away, you're going to have a much higher likelihood of finding those kind of people. But I don't knock men at all for not wanting to approach or choosing not to approach women in today's climate. And look, if someone has the confidence to nonchalant go up to a girl and say something and all this kind of stuff, more power to them. But even seeing the behavior of some women where they will talk down to average, just decent men who really don't even want anything to do with them, just in public, and they're calling them clowns and bums and stuff like that, and making kind of backhanded comments. I mean, it's so wrong to me. Like, most guys are just going about their business, focusing on themselves, focusing on the people close to them, trying to support them and trying, the best of their ability to get by. They don't need women trying to knock them down a peg and this kind of stuff, because it's just ego. That's what it is. You have a lot of these egomaniacs running rampant nowadays. And the crazy thing is, when you say this kind of stuff about the behavior, the degenerate behavior and stuff like that, you get a lot of pushback. For example, things like these online videos that are so rampant on social media, which if you guys ever used Instagram, it's basically a billboard for it to some extent. But I've gotten in arguments with people over this who are defending it, saying that, oh, it's empowering, it's work, you're a misogynist, which to me is so, I guess telling the truth nowadays makes you a misogynist. Just like all these other terms that have been thrown around so much that essentially have no meaning anymore, and people don't even care about being called them. But I heard the argument that the issue is not women in these kind of industries, it's men not being able to approach women and men being afraid to approach women. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, you're defending this. You call yourself a feminist. You call yourself for the whatever you want to say, whatever you want to call it, for women being treated better, for whatever it might be they're saying. Do they not realize that these industries literally destroy the woman's reputation? Any girl who's in these kind of movies, they're not going to be able to have a normal relationship or marriage down the line. Even I've seen a lot of girls offing themselves who were in these videos because they realized down the line how foolish it was. When they were younger, they either got duped into it or they were so desperate for the fame and attention and validation that they didn't think any further beyond that. So I'm like, who in the right mind would defend this kind of stuff, especially if you call yourself a feminist or whatever, where you say you're for empowerment and all this kind of stuff, which it's, I mean, let's be honest, what that whole movement is just about degrading men and about ultimately it's about not uplifting. It's just about talking down to men and shaming them. That's what it is. And again, the whole like toxic masculinity stuff. You wonder why a lot of men are not approaching women, because they don't want to be seen as toxic, creep, whatever. All these false allegations. Like I saw a video of some girl walking in the park, and there was just, it's a public park and a trail, and there was some guy at least like 50 feet behind her, just walking, minding his own business. And this girl was like recording on the face camera and saying that the guy was like following her and stalking her and that kind of stuff, making these kind of false allegations where it's like, these women need to understand you are not that important. You are not that important. Get off your high horse. Not every man wants you. That's the truth. I mean, these women, a lot of them, they think that, which again, this can apply to more than just women, but they've had this false validation through the dating apps, through the social media, thinking that they're on some high horse when they're really not. Again, this is again why I'm such a big believer in just being humble when it comes to anything in life. No matter how rich someone is, no matter how in shape someone is, no matter how strong someone is, no matter how much power and influence they have, is to be humble. And I see a lot of women who are just not at all in a position of humility or exclusivity or anything like that. To walk in a public setting and think that a guy 50 feet behind you is stalking you or following you is just ridiculous. So when you have a guy which in most cases they're good-looking guys, and when they see stuff like that, they're not going to want to approach women to get these kind of false allegations and stuff like that. Keep in mind, you hear about all the horror stories of men who are married and are in relationships, which of course we can talk about all different kinds of factors. We can talk about how there is a really an attempt to just subdue and get rid of traditional masculine values, masculine leadership in today's society. Again, a big problem I see as well is that you have men that are trying to give advice to younger men who are engaging in trashy behavior that's ultimately partly contributing to the problem. You know what I mean? Like going to nightclubs and hooking up and that kind of stuff. That's not at all what a real man would do. That's, again, feminine behavior. That's very insecure behavior. And, when I say feminine, obviously there's masculine traits and feminine traits. And insecurity and needing validation from other people is not at all a masculine trait. That's something that a weak man would do. But, guys, I'm just getting to thinking, like, it's not because most men are ugly. It's not because most men are not confident. It's just because they value being alone over being abused. That's what it comes down to. And you shouldn't have to bend over backwards and walk on eggshells just to talk to a girl or get a girl or anything like that. But I truly believe this. I believe that if men truly walk away, because again, these women are still getting all the attention from the dating apps and stuff like that, social media. Women are going to become desperate. Because if you notice, a lot of the women that say this kind of stuff, they are doing things still for male attention. For example, making a social media account and uploading thirst traps and stuff like that. That's for attention and validation. That's the truth, guys. Making dating app accounts with no intention of going on dates, but all the intention of getting DMs and validation and stuff like that, just for your own ego. That is for male attention. What a lot of men don't seem to understand is that if they truly walk away and stop giving the attention, women are going to become desperate. That's the truth, guys. I mean, people can say it all they want. I know I've heard arguments about this, about women putting on makeup and dressing a certain way and this kind of stuff, saying that, oh, well, it's for their own confidence. And it's like, a lot of women are doing that for male attention and validation, if not from men, from other women, whatever it might be. Men don't need to do stuff like that. because that's not masculine to do. You shouldn't need attention and validation from other people. I'm not saying you should be a sociopath and not care about anyone and stuff like that. But I'm saying your peace of mind and your well-being shouldn't be dependent on how many likes a post of yours get, or shouldn't be dependent on how much attention you get or compliments you get. You should have your own peace of mind. You should have your own principle, and you should be confident in yourself without that kind of stuff. So, just something I noticed, guys. I mean, it's really come to the point right now where, I mean, we see it. You look at the data with Gen Z and stuff like that, even millennials as well, of declining marriages and increase in singlehood and stuff like that, because the dynamics are just all over the place. That's really what I noticed, guys. But anyway, thanks so much for viewing the video. Appreciate it. Hope you guys have a good one.